with ducks, you're looking at where they sit in the water and how they sit. Sorry.
We all know that.
Yeah. Some are quite broad and bobbly. There, I'm really in trouble now. That went live, didn't it? Can you cut that? Yeah. I don't know if I like this. You're looking at the profile of the head and bill in particular. The shape and size of the bill, the strength of the bill is really important. And the tail feathers, particularly in the diving ducks, are very distinctive. And then it's about where you get colour through. And in this case, we're looking at quite a bland bird, but we've got a distinct peak on the head. We've got a really distinctive bill, that broad start, and you can even see that little point at the tip of the bill. It's a freckled duck, which are quite an uncommon bird. They have periods where they increase in number. They rely on big inland floods, and they need water under their nest for quite a few months in order to breed successfully. And so they really nest in very dense vegetation that's surrounded by water on those floodplains. No. When you get the floods, amazingly, a lot of birds just disappear up north to those floods, and so they're breeding during that period, and then they disperse out as the inland dries out, or as the big floodplains dry out. They disperse out into the fringing parts of Australia, and you get them in the wetlands right around the edge. Yes. Yes, that's true. Yeah, it probably was. Okay, so we've got the freckled duck, and it's a female. And yeah, we'll talk about the male again later. Okay. Could be. Could be. Well, you would have found the grebes page today. Great crested grebe.
I missed a couple of words in the name, but it was a crested word.
Yep, well done. Notice the colouring of the feathers.
How white is brown.
So the white ones, they're just low levels of melanin. The black ones are eumelanin. And then you've got the brown ones. Not all of them, but yeah. Yep. These ones, you don't see them flying around that often, but when they're in their pairs and they're going through their mating dances, they're just the most amazing birds on the water. And you see those spectacular mating dances. They build a nest that floats out on the water side of reeds, and then when the young are hatched, you'll see them often on the backs of the birds, swimming around, sitting on the backs. And they're quite spectacular young. They really have distinctive colouring and black and white barring all across the body.
What do you think those grebes were eating on them? Yabbies,
They will take yabbies, although smaller ones. I saw one catch a big yabby up in Carlytown, up in Victoria once, and it came up with this monster, and it fought it for about an hour. The first 20 minutes or so was it clipped off the two big claws, and then each time it dropped it, went down, got it again, brought it back up. Then it started munching it a bit in the beak, and then it finally got it, threw it up, and it actually just stuck. It was too big. Wouldn't get down the throat. And it did in the end get it down, I think, but it took a lot of crunching and crushing and so on, but softening up, yeah. But they would take everything from little insects like the larvae of dragonflies and that through to small fish and yabbies and things like that. Okay, so we've got the great crested grebe. And they're a really spectacular bird. You get them on bigger bodies of water. You see them every now and then on big swamp, places like that.
Where about?
Big swamp.
Yep.
No, not a shag, but they used to be called shags, but that's from the English shag, which is closely related, but slightly different from the cormorants. But yeah, common name for it is shag. Now, 5 types of cormorants that we get around here. 2 of them are black, and 3 of them are black and white. So the first thing you ask is it all body black, or is it white on the belly and black on the back? So that's the 2 major groups you've split them into. And then you look at the head, and you're looking at the amount of colour on the head. So which page have we got cormorants on? 122. Are people starting to use the front page of the book to find the group quickly? Yeah. Inside the cover there. The front half is non-passerines, and the back half is a few non-passerines and then all the passerines. So we'll be looking at the non-passerines tonight. Great cormorant. Yeah. So you've got the yellow, quite distinctive. The white, it doesn't go through under the eye like it does for the little pied and things like that. And if you look at the little black, which is the other all black bird, the little black cormorant, what do you notice about its head? All black. So if you're seeing colouring in the head and it's all black, then it's the great, which is a bigger bird anyway. So if it's a long way away, sometimes size is not obvious. If you're seeing just an all black head, then it's the little black. So great cormorant. And the other one I'll put in, just because they're around this part of the world, there's 2 groups that you need to check with quail. There's quail and there's button quail. They're separate. If you've got an old book, the quail and the button quail will be on the same page. If you've got a new book, the quail will be at the front and the button quail will be in the middle, because they're quite distinct from each other. Yep.
Jump on them. What are you about? If you put the spotlight on, that's where they land.
When they fly away, if you see them well, you'll see the quail have a one-tone wing. If you see the button quail, as they fly off or just before they prop up to land, you'll see they have a two-tone wing. So that's a cue for the ones around this part of the world, whether they're button quail or quail. This has got a one-tone wing, so it's a quail. And then looking at it closely, you can see quite distinctive markings on the feathers and around the head. They have a really distinctive call, and if you're out in your paddocks all across EP, you'll hear this pick the wheat. All through the wheat fields, all through the different paddocks. It's not the internet, it's an app, so shouldn't have to.
Now I can.
Yep.
Didn't have it switched on before.
Yep. I'll play you one later that half the room won't hear. Badly. But that pick the wheat, you'll hear that, and if you get that little mnemonic in your head, you'll always recognise it. All across EP, quite common, yeah.
What's that side?
There's two apps. I'll talk about them over the next few weeks if you're interested. There's those two apps there. Yeah, so this one's a stubble quail.
The other door, Daddy.
Okay, now, often heard more often than it's seen, usually deep in reed beds. And we'd get a lot more of them recorded on EP, I'm sure, if people knew their call. No? Does anyone know what group it's in?
Is it a wanderer?
No?
Is it crake?
It's in that crake group. Rails, yep. So it's in the crakes and rails.
So it's not a ground dweller.
You'll find that book fails you all the time. You really need to be using one of these. So I'll get you one. So it has the major ones, but when you think there's 300 odd birds on EP, yeah. No, it's not the Lewins.
That one here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a rail.
Okay, this is one you'll be near a wetland in reed beds, or it'll be thick veg around the edge of a wetland, and you'll hear this call. And I would have recorded, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 of these around the lakes when I was doing surveys there, but I reckon I saw 2 of them. So most of them you're going to have to recognise by call. They're not going to come out in the open. If they do come out in the open and you're lucky and you see them, they'll give a tail flick if they're alert to your presence. And if you look at the banding on the tail, that's quite distinctive. But most of the time, you're not going to see them. So the call becomes critical. And you might be down along the Todd River or around the Todd Reservoir, places like that. Might be your dam at home with a little bit of reed bed at one end, and you hear this call. Go and check it out. It's not going to come out and let you see it unless you, very shy, very cryptic. So buff banded rail. The juvenile is much plainer, but beware of them, and we're going to go through quite a few of these little cryptic birds in reed beds and things like that tonight. Just make sure you're aware of the different calls and start to go and investigate. Think about the feathers, primaries, the secondaries, the coverts.
Coverts are what? Grey and the white
Yeah.
It's Australian wood duck. What size? What size? 31.
So in your ducks, early in the, what was it, 24 or something onwards? I'm sure you all know the tongue twister. How much wood would a wood duck chuck?
Does this one climb trees?
They breed.
Up in the trees?
A lot of ducks breed in the trees, in hollows in trees. They mostly eat grass. So our dams that we've put in across our farms all across southern and eastern Australia have done these guys the world of good. So typically you'll have a pair or two pairs around your dam, and they'll have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 chicks running around behind them. They've done very well. Yeah. So they do that broken wing behaviour to drag you away. A few things to notice though, that the size of that bill is much different from the first duck we're looking at, and the ones that we look at as we move.
It's a bit hard with that photo though because it's going away.
It is flying away, yeah. All looks foreshortened. But Australian wood duck. Yep. How about this guy? Another one that you're not going to see very often, and when you do see it, you're not going to see that brown and grey. It's going to look like a black bird. You'll hear this call coming out of the reed beds. Yeah, it is. This is another call they make. No. And their little contact call. No. No, bill's all wrong. Wrong habitat. So, sooties. It's a crake, yes. Look up your crakes. Now I was going to get you bird book. You're working in that one?
Yeah, we're still sharing.
Yep. This is one of those funny names that suggests there's another crake called the spotted crake, which looks very similar, of course. So if you see it out in the open and you can see the two tones, the brown and the grey, it's quite distinctive. But it's typically either on the edge of reeds in the shadows or right in the middle of the reeds. And again, it's another one of those ones where I recorded hundreds of them in reed beds and I had them calling around my feet, but I wasn't seeing them. They're really, really cryptic, really hard to see. The spotless crake, you've all got that one? Yep. The call again. And if you hear that really neat advertising call, so you get the and then
That's the same bird, is it?
yeah.
Oh, I thought it was in the background.
And you get them on EP.
What, once in the winter, or are they here all the time? Or?
That I don't know. They're just not recorded very often. So start to think and listen around those reed beds. Around.
Call it shrill machine gun chitter.
Yep. So your Vietnam vet hits the ground right beside you. You know what's going on. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, that's fluffy.
See the tail? That's typical of the diving ducks. They have that tail with lots of feathers all raked around like a comb. The name comes from the odour that they have, which is very musk-like. Apparently when they were first caught, the ship smelt of this musk for a long time.
So that's not a very pleasant smell.
I don't imagine it is, no. I've never had one in the hand. Male's got a huge, big skin
Bill flap, they call it.
underneath the bill. And this is the female. You see them in 2s, 3s, 4s, in the deeper wetlands. They'll stay there for months and then they just disappear. Like a lot of these birds, they fly overnight, so they'll move out and you won't see them moving overnight. And after the young are born, they hang around with the female. If ever you get to see them during the mating period and defending the territories, the males do this really weird thing across the water, and it's very obvious. Let me play the call for you. You'll hear this out in the wetlands. All quite distinctive, but like all of the non-passerines, or nearly all of them, the call is simple. It's a whistle, or it's a honk, or it's a plonk, or you know. It's when we get into the passerines later on that the complexity of the calls really increases.
Do you see these in groups or just one or two?
One or two or 3s or 4s, yeah. I've seen a lot of them at the Cleve Dam up behind Cleve there, or you get them on Big Swamp and Little Swamp and places like that. Yeah. Get them out. Get them out in the in the bays as well sometimes. Okay, so musk duck.
Artist impression, oh.
Yeah, it's blown up pretty big. Yep. Yep, we've got to tease the herons apart from the egrets, apart from, we don't get the storks down here, but we're in that part of the world. No, no. No, it's much. No, no.
Black neck stork?
No. Look at the white just around the face. The white's just around the face, and the other thing is, on the wings, it's two tones. It's got the primaries and secondaries are black, and then the coverts, the underwing coverts, are lighter. And the one that you might confuse it with is the white-necked heron. That's the one you should be looking at. The white-faced heron. Yeah. Notice them in flight. They show two different tones under the wing. No. Yeah, the colour's not the best. It's not the best photo, but you're not going to see these so close very often. They typically take off from the wetland as you come towards it, or they're on the other side. But they're very common all through here. And on EP they get into big groups. You often see them out in paddocks, and there might be 30, 40, 50 of them together, which I haven't seen down south very much, but you see up north the bigger groups. Yeah, so white-faced heron, but you get lots of them, particularly down this southern EP over winter, right through the region. White-faced heron. Your favourite? A lot of people over here call them mountain ducks, which is what I grew up calling them. Yeah. Shell duck. Yeah. And what's the sex?
Australian shell duck.
Yeah.
What sex?
Yeah.
Which is the one with the going out? The arrow. Is that
Yeah,
the
yeah.
female? Which one?
No. You've got to have your year 10 brain working, okay? Year 10 boy, and you've got to think about that arrow, and that's the end of it. That's a boy. And the year 10 girl is the cross. And that's about it. You're looking at the white around the eye? And the white on the beak? Can you see a difference? The male doesn't have the white around the eye and the white across the top of the beak. The female. You can pick that. They're a call that I associate with wetlands in Australia. particularly at night if you camp by a wetland. It's a common call, and this is a group of them taking off. That brings back lots of memories, that call. Yeah. Okay. So Australian shelduck. Well, they're protected always, but then in some seasons you can shoot. Yeah. Notice that it's really not floating. It's a neutral density. Its body is in the water, which is why it can do what it does. It can sit down there and chase after fish. And unlike the cormorants, which catch the fish in the beak often, these guys actually stab the fish. So you'll see them come up to the surface and they'll flick the fish in the air and catch it. But they actually use that strike into the fish with the beak. Probably not a heap. Usually, yeah. They're quite a big bird, so, and yeah. Okay.
And they were doing fishing and coming up and
Yeah.
getting off.
And there was a group of them together.
Well, they were coming in, feeding and going, and then the next, like it was
Right.
off the bench.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Yeah. You do get them in larger numbers.
I think that's what they were. It's hard to
Have a look at the data. They're classic birds sitting on a branch on the Murray, the wings out drying. On the foreshore. Yeah. I'm wondering what... Okay. I haven't seen many... I haven't seen many around on EP, but they are here. Yeah. It could have been one of the cormorants, but we'll have a look at a few in a minute and see what you reckon. Then, because of this, if you've seen them on a river or lake when they're like this, they look like a snake on the water. So a lot of people call them snake birds. But they're a darter, Australasian darter. What's the age of that one? Juvenile. The adults have quite a colourful head. It's quite distinctive. Yeah, males and females. So that's a young one. Which group? No. Egret, yeah.
We got that one. We got that one in the last one. We're ahead of the pack here.
Yeah. The trouble with photos is that just one view of it, and when you get all that need for the diagrams. How do you know it's not the intermediate?
Eastern grey? No, it's the grey egret.
How do you know it's the great egret?
Because of his yellow bill and his...
No.
Oh, I thought it was the breeding plumage of the intermediate. Because it looks like that one. It's a little egret.
If you take the neck and straighten it out and compare the length of the neck to the length of the body, what do you reckon it would be? Shorter than the body, the same length as the body, or longer than the body? Longer. And if you look at that, you should be able to pick them at 1 kilometre or 2. It's a great egret. Because you're looking at the length of the neck compared to the length of the body. If you get a closer look, can you see a bit of skin coming around under the eye? Notice that it goes right back behind the eye. Now, these birds have had a tough time in Australia because typically they require about 6 months of water under their nest before they breed successfully. So 6 months of water under a nest takes a long, solid flood. And what we've taken out of our flood systems, Murray, Darling, that sort of part of the world, is those big, long floods. And if the water drops rapidly underneath the nest, they'll abandon it. Or if the water doesn't last at least 2 or 3 months, they won't even get to the point with hormones and everything else and the food production that happens with a flooded river that they can start to breed. So these are birds that haven't done as well as they might in the southern parts of Australia because of the way we manage our river systems. And particularly with the intermediate egret, that needs 9 months of water under its nest.
That's
So
an intermediate?
this is the great. So
Longer neck.
So, colouring of the beak, but can you see that bit of skin going right back behind the eye there?
Yeah, no, it just says the great egret is usually black, except for breeding.
Except for breeding, goes
yellow.
yellow.
That's orange.
Oh, well, yeah.
Little egret, intermediate egret, bill orange or red. So I would have gone straight intermediate.
No, definitely not. So, if you go, for example, at Thompson's Beach or a lot of our bays around here, but at Thompson's Beach, north of Adelaide, you might get 200, 300, 400 of these right along the beach. You can stand there and scan right down the beach. As far as you see, they'll be right out across the mudflat. It's really quite common. And you can pick them by the length of that neck compared to the body. Bill colour and leg colour and that can be helpful.
So what do they eat?
They eat all sorts of insects through small fish, through even yabbies and things like that.
There's a lot of crabs at Thompson's Beach, isn't there?
Yeah, probably have a go at them too. Okay, so great egret, eastern great egret. Now, back to the ducks. Where's that?
Grey teal.
Front of the book. How do you know it's not a female chestnut teal?
Good way of getting used to the book, isn't it?
Yep. That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Yeah. We need you to be going away in 10 weeks' time knowing that book. Why is it a grey teal?
It's got a red eye.
The brown eye up closer to its eye, whereas on the chestnut teal it goes down lower the cheek.
No, the brown on the chestnut teal, the female, it's brown above around the eye as well. What's the difference?
White. More white.
It's not the top that you're looking at, it's the contrast.
It's like a spot between underneath the eye and that bit.
Yeah, so
That cheek right down to the ear, so that's what I meant.
yeah, this bit
From the eye.
from the eye down around the neck is white compared to dark at the top. And if you're looking at the female of the chestnut teal, it's much dirtier. It's not a clean white, it's a dirtier black white. When you look at them out across a swamp or whatever, you'll see the male chestnut teals and you'll see the female chestnut teals. Have a closer look. There'll be a lot of grey teals, probably as many typically as the chestnut teals. And what you're looking for is that contrast between the top of the head and the bottom of the head.
It also looks like there's white
Yeah,
belly and that's lighter.
the top of the body and the feathers on the belly, it's not something you're going to be able to identify them by. So you've got to actually just look at the head, and you can scan across with your scope or with your binoculars, and you can actually count the grey teal versus the female of the chestnut teal. It's possible to do it, and you've just got to concentrate on it for a while and you'll start to see the differences, particularly on a sunny day. So there's your grey teal. That's your chestnut teal. Notice it's much darker through there. It's still got the contrast, but this is dirtier. You won't always see that. That can often be covered up with feathers. Yep, so there's your female chestnut teal. If you put them side by side, it's that contrast that we're really after. Okay? Everything else, the way in which you've got the edge, the margin of the feather is white. That's present in both. And the amount of darkness in the feather. The breast might be a little bit different, but you're not going to pick that when they're sitting in the water at a long way away. So you need to be able to look at those two parts and compare them and get the idea into your head, and you'll be able to pick them. And they're probably our two most common birds that you'll see.
I went down to the railway dam the other night. I was standing there down there, and when they got into the light, the white part was reflecting back in the water.
Yeah.
And it made it hard to work out what they were, really.
Okay.
Because there was another thing there that was nearly all white, like the duck.
Okay.
So I don't know what the hell it was.
Nearly all white.
Yeah, well, that's how it showed up on the water.
Mouse? He's probably had a few already.
I can tell you that.
Okay, so grey teal and the female chestnut teal. Trickier ones to tell apart, but you can do it. And people can get confused if they start to look for other things. So do teach yourself. Yep. So the question was, is it a pied, black and white, or is it all black? If it's all black, where do we look? But is it pied? Is it black and white, white underneath, black on top? No, it's not. There's two types of black cormorants. If one's got colour on its face and the other one hasn't, you should be able to pick it quickly. So it's a great cormorant. So there's your great cormorant. Yep. I'm allowed to repeat things. Yep. Yeah. You get these, they can get up into really big groups and they're quite spectacular to watch. You can have thousands. I've been in amongst thousands in the Gippsland lakes in Victoria, and they're all diving and catching and they're herding the fish as a group moving through the water. Really quite amazing. But what's the key thing that you're seeing? Black head. There's no colour there. Yep. So you can pick cormorant, you can pick all black, and then it's about colour. Yeah, they do. But because of the way in which tuna, for example, are fed out here, we get some pretty big flocks of greats as well. Yeah. So little blacks. This guy? These are really interesting because they're a marine species. A lot of our cormorants, you get them marine, but they're mostly found through the freshwater systems, the rivers, the lakes.
I assume that's a cormorant. That's what's doing our fishing.
Yeah, I reckon it's a cormorant. And I'd be calling it one of these. I reckon it is. No. Yeah, no, I reckon that's what it is. So one of these guys. If it's a pied cormorant, once you've worked out it's a pied, you then look at the head. Has it got white coming through between the eye and the bill? Has it got colour on its face? Or is it just black and white? So we've got 3. And this is the black-faced. So this is the marine species. And Eyre Peninsula seems to be a real key centre for the population in Australia. And very big numbers. Yep. So black-faced versus the other 2 pied. You've got 3 pied species and the black-faced versus the other 2. And you can see why it's the black-faced. Yep. No colour, no white up through.
They're a bit smaller than the pied cormorants.
Yeah, not much though.
About 10 centimetres.
So if you look at them side by side,
That's the pied. We've got that yellow.
it's a pied at the front, yeah.
Oh, the black at the back.
And then can you see the white through the top here? And the size? Little pied. And then behind it, a black face. So there they are side by side. I managed to get 3 together. What I didn't manage to do was get them in focus. Don't you hate that? And of course they immediately moved and that was it. But I was quite happy about that. They were a very long way away on a rock, so. But it does, most of the time nowadays I'm thinking about the bird course, so I didn't have this in the first or second year. So there's your pied at the front, quite distinctive, and you can see the comparison in size. They're not that much different in size when you look at them side by side. The pied is a bit bigger, but not much. Then there's the little pied, which is distinctively smaller. And then there's the black-faced. And you get all 5 here on Eyre Peninsula. So another one of those ones that is heard and seldom seen. But it's not the adult. Yeah. Can you see the juvenile there? Yeah. So you hear this call out of reed beds, but not often recorded, again, because it's not often seen. So we need to know the call. Balin's crake. Yep. Juvenile. That's right, that's right. You can take this home and if you bring a flash drive, I'm happy to give you a copy and take it home and go through it again. That's right. Yeah.
The white-necked heron? There's got a bit white on
Where's the white in the wing?
Just on the shoulder, on the,
Not the shoulder. What part of the wing is that? The wrist, yeah, the wrist of the wing. And it's which coverts? Lesser, yeah. So it's right up the top, and it's even the next layer around. So if you if you go back here, looking on your wing, you've got those lessers, and then right at the very front, you've got those marginal coverts as well. Yep, see the... When you look at them flying off, if you don't get a good look at that white neck, if it's a dull day or they're going the wrong direction, if you look under the wing, unlike the white-faced heron, which has two tones or more, you just get the one tone under the wing. So, white-necked heron, all good? Yep. Which group? Egrets, good. What do you notice about the leg and the bill colour? The cere. What do you notice about the feathers coming off the back? And the feathers coming off the head? Breeding plumes, yep. Get those beautiful, fine, lacy feathers on the back. Quite spectacular. You don't see them initially, usually. Sorry? Yeah, yeah. It would be about the length of the body, yeah. But the bill and the leg colour helps you a lot there. And then when you start to see that, which you won't see straight away because it might be flat or it might be just the light or whatever, and then suddenly you get a good look at it. And you see it in the book? In the breeding plumage. So it's a little egret. Yeah, as you go through the books, you'll see things that are strengths and weaknesses. I like all sorts of elements of books. But the thing I like only about this book that makes it better is it's more modern. That's the only thing that really... So it has more species. Okay. This is one that we get all around the coast on EP. If you go to Streaky Bay, you'll see them at the caravan park in the trees all day. Down in Port Lincoln, Tumby. They sit up in the trees, and then about just before dusk you'll see them take off out of the trees and fly down to the coast, and they'll spend all night feeding along the coast. And then back in the morning they're back in the trees again. No. They've got the much stockier, so they're not the egrets, they're not the herons. They're down towards the bittern side of it. They're just a little bit different from the bitterns. Night herons, yeah. They are at different parts along the coast, yep. Streaky Bay, Venus Bay, Ceduna. Where else have I seen them? Tumby Bay, Port Lincoln, and I'd swear they'd be, yeah. Where there's mangroves, you'll find them resting up in the mangroves. This is not the full adult. Juvenile plumage. Nankeen night heron. Some books will have Rufus night heron. Juvenile. So, you've seen them? Good man. If you're down the primary school just behind the Baptist church, they used to fly out of those trees just opposite the post office there, those big trees through there. If you know what you're looking for during the day, they're just opposite the post office, the trees that run up away from the bay, near the tourist information.
They roost in the trees.
Yeah, they roost in the trees all during the day. And if you're at Streaky Bay at the caravan park, those trees that run along the front of the caravan park, there's lots in there. If you start looking with your binos, you'll find them. They're just sitting still, and then late in the afternoon they'll go.
Are they the ones that cause the boggers? They're very acid. They're
Sorry,
very acid. They're done. Is that the ones that cause all the trouble with the
yeah, they do. And cars under the trees, yeah, because they're sitting there all day digesting their food, and then yeah, and they feed all night along the shoreline. Yep. Nankeen night heron. Ah, reasonable size. Yeah. Okay. Right, you've got your 10 seconds before you fire your shot. You've ID'd it, and you've made your decision. And having pulled the trigger, you realise that you're in really big trouble. No. Look at that bill. Big, strong bill, and then flattens out. Look under the wings. Which has the white in the wing? Yep. So that those underwing coverts are white. You got that nice triangular pattern. Yeah. Identifying them on the water is very different from identifying them in the air. Yep. You've got that nice distinct triangle. That head is very distinctive. Freckled duck again. The male has that really red triangle. Yeah. Nope. This is another call of wetlands. You really need to be focusing on this.
I'm trying to do it quick.
Yep, because we're trying to learn all of them in the book. There you go, you're in the right part of the world. Yep. dusky moorhen. If you get to see that bill, there's nothing else that has that red and then yellow.
Bright green legs, isn't it? It's got the little one's got black.
You can see the wing of this hasn't started to form yet. So you can see the primaries and the secondaries haven't even started to grow yet. It's just the allula sticking down and the bones. So a real chicken wing. Dusky moorhen, everyone's happy? No. 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 This is the one that people often get confused and they write the wrong one down quite regularly. So think about it very carefully. Sorry? Yeah. You don't often see the beak that colour. Yep. It's a diving duck. It's not that common. If you've got them out on a lake and you're scanning for the different ducks, these are really annoying because they keep going under and they're under longer than they're up.
I've got a question mark there, so I must have been...
Seen one that you thought?
I wasn't too sure, yeah.
Yep, you get them over here. We had them the last few years.
I'm pretty sure I've seen them out at Numpara, like halfway between here and Ulata.
Okay.
On
little wetlands there?
We had like 3 wet years in a row,
Yeah.
and they moved in, and there
Okay.
were heaps of different ducks and that, and we've seen some of them.
I've seen them on the sewage ponds at just out of Port Lincoln, just north of Port Lincoln. What's it called? North Shields. The sewage ponds there. If you ever get a chance, the sewage ponds there are brilliant for all sorts of ducks. Worth a trip. Yeah. Well, if you do, the other people will be birders, so it's okay. If you're going towards the airport, just at the very beginning of North Shields, the road goes off to the left, which is called Murray Drive, and about 2k out there on the right-hand side, there's a series of ponds. No, you.
Yeah, right next to there.
Right.
Turn left up there. Yep. You're right.
Yes. Oh, to turn off. Yes. Just before the 60.
If you were going up past Glen Murray's.
Yeah. And that's really good for all sorts of ducks. I've seen a huge variety out there, including quite a few rare ones. Freckled duck, blue-billed, that sort of thing. You get hardheads there. You get quite a few species. Okay, so blue-billed duck. The tail's quite distinctive, but and the size and shape is fairly obvious if you get, but you don't often see that blue bill. So you've got to be sure it's not a female muskie, and other things like that. So it's quite distinctive if you start to think about all the little elements. I do. That's the entire intent.
It looks like a shovel or something.
No, it's an egret in the egret group.
The thing in the back. No, I might just have a...
Whistler duck. The entire intent of this is that by the end of the course, you know this Bleary book inside out. You have flipped back and forwards. How many times do you reckon you've done it so far this particular evening? Enough. Sorry?
Because it's got the yellow beak and the black legs.
Yeah, but too big and long a neck. Cattle egret is a bit smaller.
Oh, okay.
if you look here, you can tell it apart from the great, but that's really hard to see. The key thing is, if I measure the length of that neck and lay it along the body's a little bit longer. Not much, just a little bit. That's the intermediate. It's not the great, it's the intermediate. Now, these birds really plummeted in number during the 90s and 2000s because they didn't breed along the Murray-Darling system. The only place they were breeding in southern Australia was down on the Barwon River, down in the wetlands at the end of the Barwon system. So because they need that really long period of water under their nests, they need 9 months of water. So
How long will the bird what they live for?
they live for 20 or 30 years or maybe even, yeah, but after 20 years you're looking at most of the population having senesced. And it's only the really young ones that are coming through. Up north they've done okay because they still get all the floods up north. But down south, there was one reported on Eyre Peninsula last year, so keep an eye out. But intermediate egret. And if you do look at that head, if you get a good look, notice how there's only a little flick there, it doesn't go right back, it's not a big long mark. Okay, intermediate. How about this guy? Cape Barren goose. Now these were really endangered going back 30 years ago.
They're really common now.
They're not really common, they're more common, but in Western Australia they're still very uncommon.
Right
So,
next door to the airport, there's like a flock of like 40 or 50
yep.
in one group.
And there was about 600 or 700 on Big Swamp earlier this year. So, yeah. But they're still not out of the woods yet. And that's the sad part. When their numbers start to increase again, back to something that might be a little bit healthy, of course, they eat green pick. So they're really impacting on some farmers. And it's a really tricky thing to play. They breed on the offshore islands, which is why they've been successful. But they have a challenging time on the offshore islands because the young have to grow quick enough and be able to fly off before everything dries out, before they run out of water on the offshore islands and run out of green pick. And then if they don't get that nice long spring, then they die on the islands, so that you lose a lot of them there. If they do make it to the mainland, you often see a lot of dead young along the coast because they fly in and out every day. So there's demands on them that are great energetically. But yeah.
They don't breed a shore where here in the cropping paddock.
No, they're coming to feed and then they're off again each night. We don't get them fly over Port Lincoln, but if you're down at North Shields and places like that, you get to see them fly out each night. Tumby Bay. Yeah.
And they honk like.
They honk. They're one of our few geese. We've got a few very small ones up north, pygmy geese, but they're one. Lake Hamilton, okay. And yeah, east and west coast. So Eyre Peninsula's. Yep. And we get them down breeding on the islands offshore of the Coorong, that part of the world. Anyway, I've seen them out on a lot of the islands, even out on Rocky Island, right down south.
Down on
Greenley, yeah. So they do get around, and all along the coast. Yeah. Oh, the part that impresses me about Rocky Island is the seagulls breeding there. And if you've ever seen a seagull nest, how do you get that many branches on Rocky Island? Interesting. Is that 200 years worth of effort? One branch a year. So Cape Barren goose. They hadn't been recorded around the lower lakes, the lower lakes in Coorong for years and years and years. And we did a survey around there over a couple of years and we recorded 3, but we never saw them. I had one there. And that black line there is not a reed.
Oh, is it? Not a shadow?
Not a shadow.
No, it's a pheasant.
And they stand there with their head up like that. This is their call. Hear it? Now, in theory, they're on our peninsula. I haven't heard one here, but I'd really like to know if there's one. And you're not going to see it.
It's sort of cool or something.
No. Hear it? Just? There's one worse than this. I'll play you for in a sec. It's not this species, it's a closely related species. So you're out in the wetland and you hear this distant, dull sort of call. But the worst one is this guy. You just sort of feel the air vibrate.
You do?
And you're thinking, something not quite right.
Here, this is the Australian bittern. The bittern, right?
That one?
Same.
Just a really deep ooh, ooh.
Oh, it sounds like a frog, doesn't it?
Ooh. Just a really deep background. Yeah, well done.
What did you say it was?
Little bit.
I hear that.
No, it's really.
Just on crack record.
Put your hand on it. Put your hand on the iPad, just underneath it. Try it. Just put your hand underneath it. It's really deep. It's just at the bottom of our hearing, and you're out there in the wetlands, and you can feel this, but you have no idea. It's near, and you have no idea where it is. No, this is the Australian one, but that one's the little one.
I can't hear it, but I feel it.
You feel it there. Same again. Put your hand underneath it and just feel the iPad vibrating. And if you really think about it, you can hear it as well. That's the Australian one. Sorry, I played the little one before. So the little one you can hear a bit more distinctly. It's a bit more distinct. But that Australian bittern is quite a deal different. So this is the little bittern, the Australian little bittern. And they're probably a bit more common than people think. You just don't see them. You're not going to see them. You've got to hear them.
Just go above one above it. Then they came
Now, yeah.
compared to Australian bittern, what they seem similar, yet they got a completely different
Yeah, it'll be about skeletal structures and DNA. And
Looks longer, whereas the Australian bitterns looks like more squashed up.
Yeah, they're quite distinctive in their habitat use, and but yeah, they're
Just an observation. Would similar bird, but
yeah. I can pull out the key differences for you, but they're not going to be something you're going to be able to see distinctly. When you look at this guy, those stripes that you've got down the length of the body, they're very different from the bittern patterns. Yep.
Hang on, yeah, Australian little bittern.
So the little bittern, you've got those distinctive stripes right down the body, and you're not going to see that in your. But I guess the key point is you're not going to see this guy very often. You'll see the rufous night heron or nankeen night heron, whatever you want to call it. You'll see that quite regularly, but you won't see this guy very regularly at all. No, I know that map's not good. Other books show it, but that map's no good. And you'll discover that there are weaknesses in all these books. There's strengths as well, but yeah.
Yeah, mine shows that we've got them.
Yep, and they are here because I've seen them all over EP. Okay, we're running out of time, sadly. Sorry, we were a bit too long down at the. Yes, when I finish I'll run through the last few slides. So this one you see along the coast. We don't see the white one so often. We see a grey one typically, right around the coast. A reef egret. As you go north, you seem to see the white ones a lot more often than the grey ones. So that's eastern reef egret, and that's the white morph of it. Next one is a shoveler. Very distinctive, strong beak, quite obvious in profile on a wetland, a bigger duck, Australasian shoveler. These guys are highly eruptive. They appear when we get good rains, and there'll be green pick everywhere, and you'll get hundreds and hundreds of them. Yeah, and if they burst out when you fly, and they do funny things. You'll see big lines of them walking, and yeah, you'll be out in the desert in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and there'll be a rain a week ago or something, and suddenly you'll see hundreds of these birds across the desert. Really weird. Very distinctive markings and yep. So black-tailed native hen. This guy is one of my favourite birds. Glossy ibis. We had 4 or 5 of them down on Big Swamp last year. So look around, you'll see them now and then. These feathers, remember we talked about the physical coloration and we talked about the iridescent type of coloration? So they can look very bland and brown, and then they'll turn into the light and bang, you get that. Yeah.
We saw one on my daughter's home or place, just their property,
Yeah.
just near the golf course.
Oh, okay.
Probably across the road from the golf course. Yeah.
They really are a pretty bird. Glossy ibis. When you see their head, they've got beautiful white markings on their head that give really lovely patterns. This guy, yeah, they really do weird things when they're feeding. You'll get 2 or 3 of them spinning in a circle, head down, tail up, and they'll create a whirlpool. And it sort of brings food in from all over the pond, and they'll sit there feeding together, spinning around in a circle. Have that really distinctive beak. They have the little pink that gives them their name, but you don't see that unless you get close and it's bright sunlight or you're looking through a telescope. They used to be called zebra ducks for obvious reasons, and that's the key feature. That's what you'll see, that that zebra patterning. That's the first thing you'll see. The pink-haired duck. The black around the eye. Okay, this next one, this is the one that makes the spotless crake have its name. And this is the spotted crake, distinctive call. You hear that through wetlands. But again, tucked away in reed beds, don't see them out very often. When you do see them out, they look a lot like the spotless crake, unless you get them in the bright sunshine. Okay, so you need to look carefully if you're going to try and tell them apart visually. When they do jump out into the sunshine, out of the shady reeds, that it's a bit more easily seen. But remember, the spotless crake had the brown and grey as well, and often just look quite a dark bird. So Australian spotted crake. Then spoonbills and the ibis, so Australian white ibis and royal spoonbill.
Yeah, what do they call them? Dump chooks. They've taken over suburbia.
Oh, the white ibis,
Yeah,
yes.
white ibis.
Yeah.
Dump chooks and
Dump chooks. This guy, you can see it's pied, but it's got the white through above the eye and hasn't got the really intense colouring. So that's a little pied. Yeah. And this guy, they call them the hardheads because they're so hard to shoot. They keep flying even when they've got a lot of lead in them. Quite distinctive eye and the white on the beak, and that very distinctive colouring. There's also a little bit of white on the undertail coverts, but you don't see that as easily. Until you see the white, you can actually pick them, but you need to, the white of the eyes, you've got to look fairly closely, particularly when you get that shine on the water and that sort of thing. But hardheads. And that's it, sorry. Can we clean up our glasses and